Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching The World Report. Let's first take a look at the top stories. The US has frozen aid to almost all nations, including Ukraine, though military aid will continue following Joe Biden's previous packages. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin has signalled he is ready for talks with Trump over the war in Ukraine. Two military flights from the US carrying migrants have landed in Guatemala. US officials say that 4 flights have gone to Mexico. The reports suggest that Mexican officials have refused a request from President Trump to allow deportation flights to land in the country. Four Israeli hostages have been released by Hamas as part of the recent ceasefire deal. 200 Palestinian prisoners are being released by Israel in return. Elsewhere in Israel says it will not withdraw troops from Lebanon by Sunday's deadline, as agreed in the ceasefire deal with Hezbollah. The Philippines has suspended a South China Sea survey over what it's called Chinese harassment. Meanwhile, Marco Rubio has clashed with China's foreign minister over Taiwan and the South China Sea in one of his first calls as US Secretary of State. Russian President Vladimir Putin has agreed to hold talks with US President Donald Trump. Putin has, however, put forward certain conditions for the negotiations with Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky has also made comments. Let's take a look at this report.
After US President Donald Trump called on Russian President Vladimir Putin for a meeting, Putin agreed to talk about the Ukraine war and energy prices with him. However, Putin's agreement comes with conditions. He denied peace talks with Ukraine until the West leaned on President Volodymyr Zelensky to cancel a 2022 decree that bars him from negotiating with the Russian leader.
Я могу вам сказать, что если в рамках действующей нормативной базы переговоры начнутся, то они будут, строго говоря, нелегитимными. А это значит, что и результаты этих переговоров можно будет объявить нелегитимными.
Putin also praised Trump and described him as smart and pragmatic.
Не могу не согласиться с ним в том, что если бы он был президентом, если бы у него в 2020 году не украли победу, то, может быть, и не было бы того кризиса на Украине, который возник в 2022 году.
Trump had this week threatened to hit Russia with new sanctions and tariffs if it did not negotiate an end to the war. Putin replied that he did not expect Trump to make decisions on sanctions that would rebound on the US economy. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has made his remarks on the potential conversations between Trump and Putin.
Він хоче маніпулювати прагненням президента Сполучених Штатів Америки досягти миру. Я впевнений, що жодні російські маніпуляції більше не вдадуться.
Amid the lead-up to the peace talks with Trump, US State Department issued a stop work order for all the existing foreign assistance and paused new aid, according to a leaked memo. The cable, approved by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, said waivers have been issued for military financing for Israel and Egypt. No other countries were mentioned in the cable. This came after Trump ordered a pause to review if aid allocation was aligned with his foreign policy. This means the US, which used to be the biggest provider for Ukraine under the Biden administration, will now pull back our support from the warring country. With that, the truce talks hold more importance than ever now to bring an end to the more than 2-year-old war. Bureau Report, NewsX.
We'll now take a look at the latest updates from across the Indo-Pacific region. South Korean prosecutors have again asked for an extension of impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol's detention over his failed martial law bid after a Seoul court rejected a previous demand. A court issued a warrant for his arrest last week, saying there was a risk he would destroy evidence. Moving to resume bilateral engagements after the disengagement at the India-China border, Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri will travel to Beijing on January the 26th and 27th for a meeting of the Foreign Secretary-Vice Minister mechanism between India and China. Incidentally, this comes a day after the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting in Washington, D.C., which, in a thinly veiled reference to China's assertive behaviour in the Indo-Pacific that ranges from Taiwan to India-China border, pledged to strongly oppose any unilateral actions that seek to change the status quo by force or coercion. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi spoke with new US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and told the known China hawk that the direction and tone of US-China ties had been set by their leaders, and he hoped Rubio would play a constructive role for the good of the people of both countries. The call was the first between the two top diplomats under the new administration of US President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Marco Rubio also held a call on Friday with Vietnam's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Bu Thanh Song. He urged Vietnam to address trade imbalances and also discussed shared concerns about China. In the call, the first between the two top diplomats under the new administration, the two hailed the 30th anniversary of US-Vietnam relations and progress made under a comprehensive strategic partnership the countries agreed back in 2023. Cambodia's government has approved a draft law that will jail anyone denying atrocities, including genocide, committed by the Khmer Rouge. The draft law aims to prevent a repeat of the Khmer Rouge's crimes and to provide justice for victims. It was approved during a cabinet meeting chaired by PM Hun Manet. The bill stipulates the prosecution of any individual who denies or condones the atrocities committed under the Khmer Rouge. Under the bill, people will be jailed for between 1 to 5 years and could face fines of between $2,500 and $125,000. Donald Trump has pardoned 23 anti-abortion activists convicted of blocking clinic entrances, sparking criticism from abortion rights activists. This controversial move occurred just before the annual March for Life rally. Here is a full report about what has happened so far.
At a rally in Washington, Trump pledged support for the anti-abortion movement and claimed credit for overturning Roe v. Wade. He stated he would stand proudly for families and life, while reiterating that Democrats want to expand abortion access. President Trump pardoned 23 anti-abortion activists convicted of blockading a clinic. Calling it a great honor, he stated they should not have been prosecuted, noting many were elderly. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced the U.S. is rejoining the Geneva Consensus Declaration, which critics argue limits abortion access. This move follows the Supreme Court's 2022 ruling that eliminated the nationwide right to abortion. Anti-abortion activists criticized Trump for not supporting a national abortion ban, despite pardoning 23 activists convicted of blocking clinic access. Coleman Boyd, one of the pardoned, called Trump misguided and urged him to advocate for a federal ban. This event was controversial due to the presence of neo-Nazi group Patriot Front, sparking debates about Trump's connections to extremist groups. Pardon sparked debate over abortion rights. Critics claim Trump undermines FACE Act. Supporters see victory for pro-life activism. Trump's actions have sparked a debate on gender equality and women's health. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now for the latest from across the world of business. Wall Street's main indexes ended lower as investors digested mixed economic data and earnings reports. They also braced for a week of key economic releases and a Federal Reserve meeting. The technology sector was the biggest drag, with mega-cap stocks like Nvidia reversing gains from earlier in the week. Target announced that it will end its diversity, equity and inclusion program this year. It joins major US corporations like Walmart, Amazon and Meta in scaling back such policies amid pressure from conservative groups. This follows President Donald Trump's directive for federal agencies to terminate DEI programs and for private companies to end illegal DEI discrimination. United Health Group revealed that a cyber attack on its tech unit last year compromised the personal information of 190 million individuals, marking the largest healthcare data breach in the US. Also, a hack at Change Healthcare exposed the personal data of 100 million people, according to the US Health Department's October update. Meta Platforms CEO Mark Zuckerberg said the company plans to invest $60 billion to $65 billion in capital expenditure this year, up from an estimated $38 to $40 billion last year, as the tech giant expands its artificial intelligence efforts. Meta's stock price rose 1.7% on Friday to close at an all-time high of $647.49 following the announcement, topping a record set just a day earlier. The shares have gained close to 65% over the past 12 months alone. Pfizer will pay almost $60 million to resolve charges that a company it acquired defrauded Medicare and other healthcare programs by paying kickbacks so doctors would prescribe the migraine drug Nurtec OTD, the US Department of Justice said in a statement. Indian book publishers and their international counterparts have filed a copyright lawsuit against OpenAI in New Delhi. This is the latest in a series of global cases seeking to stop the ChatGPT chatbot from accessing proprietary content. Courts across the world are hearing claims by authors, news outlets and musicians who accuse technology firms of using their copyright work to train AI services. Pete Hegseth, the former Fox News host and Army veteran, has been confirmed as the US Secretary of Defense. The Senate vote was tied at 50-50, with Vice President J.D. Vance breaking the tie. Some Republican senators opposed his nomination due to concerns over his qualifications and previous behaviour. Despite controversy, President Trump has constantly supported Pete, citing his focus on military reform. Watch more about Pete Hegseth in this report.
Pete Hegseth, a former Fox News host and Army National Guardsman, has been narrowly confirmed as the United States Secretary of Defense. This confirmation follows a contentious nomination process marked by serious allegations against Hegseth.
The yeas are 50 and the nays are 50. The Senate being equally divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative and the nomination is confirmed.
Hegseth served in the U.S. Army National Guard, completing tours in Iraq, Afghanistan and Guantanamo Bay. He was awarded the Bronze Star for his service and gained first-hand experience in combat operations and military leadership. His military background has been a cornerstone of his public persona, often highlighting his experiences to advocate for veterans' issues and national defense policies. Before entering government service, Hegseth was a prominent host on Fox News, where he became known for his outspoken conservative views. He regularly defended Trump's policies and was a vocal critic of the Pentagon's diversity and inclusion initiatives, arguing for a more traditional approach to military culture. His media presence helped him build a strong following among conservative audiences. Hegseth had previously been considered for key roles within the Trump administration, including Secretary of Veterans Affairs, though he was ultimately not selected at the time. He remained an informal advisor to Trump on military and veterans issues and campaigned for various defense-related policy changes during Trump's presidency. As Defense Secretary, Hegseth is expected to prioritize border security, arguing for a stronger military presence along the US-Mexico border. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Let's now take a look at some news updates from across South America. Colombia has launched a military offensive against leftist guerrillas blamed for violence among the Venezuelan border. Over 9,000 troops are deployed, with the first battle fought between the army and the National Liberation Army. The ELN, as it's known, is targeting rival factions in the Catatumbo region, crucial for cocaine trafficking. The violence has caused at least 80 deaths so far, with numerous kidnappings and mass displacement. Argentine President Javier Milei launches a strong attack on wokeism, calling it a cancer threatening Western civilization. Speaking at the World Economic Forum, he criticised woke ideology as a mental virus undermining essential values like liberty and free speech. He claims that wokeism has infiltrated key global institutions, including government, NGOs, universities and the media. Pope Francis has expressed his commitment to addressing abuse cases within the Church. He met with Jose Enrique Escardo, the first survivor to publicly denounce abuse in the Peru-based Solidarium Christianae Vitae. Escardo, a survivor of sexual and psychological abuse, said the Pope was disgusted by his testimony. Escardo recently highlighted the SCV abuse case at the UN, calling it one of the Catholic Church's most notorious scandals. Cash-starved Cuba this month opened the first grocery store to accept hard US currency on the island in nearly 2 decades. This is the latest sign of a trend towards dollarization in the communist-run country. The store opened just a few weeks, garners praise from the lucky few with dollars. On the island, banks stopped accepting cash deposits in greenbacks just 4 years ago. Cubans with access to dollars can also purchase gasoline without waiting in long lines. Brazil, the host of this year's COP30 Global Summit, sees an opportunity to amplify the voice of developing nations. This comes in what will be a fierce dispute over who pays for the global transition to cleaner energy sources. Andre Correa de Largo, the newly appointed president of COP30, noted that under President Joe Biden, the US implemented new policies to fight climate change. He also mentioned about Biden's works to strengthen the role of multilateral development banks. This comes as US President Donald Trump withdrew the country from the Paris Climate Agreement. The Philippines has made fresh accusations on China, claiming that its Coast Guard vessels harassed Philippines fishery vessels. Owing to this, Philippines has cancelled its operation in the disputed waters of the South China Sea. This comes after US State Secretary Marco Rubio criticised aggressive Chinese actions in the waters. Here's a detailed report.
The Philippines has suspended a scientific survey in the South China Sea after facing aggressive behaviour from China's Coast Guard and Navy. 2 Philippine fisheries vessels were on their way to collect sand samples from Sandy Cay near Philippine-occupied Thitu Island. There they encountered aggressive maneuvers from 3 China Coast Guard ships. The Philippine Coast Guard blamed Chinese naval forces for deploying 4 small boats from its Coast Guard vessels to harass. 2 inflatable boats deployed by the Fisheries Bureau to transport personnel to Sandy Cay. A Chinese Navy helicopter also hovered at an unsafe altitude over the watercraft, it said. In its statement, China Coast Guard said China has indisputable sovereignty over the Spratly Islands. It added that it had intercepted 2 Philippine vessels and driven them away in accordance with the law. China Coast Guard also said the Philippine vessels had entered waters without permission and attempted to illegally land on the reef to collect sand samples. Recently, new US Secretary of State Marco Rubio had discussed China's dangerous and destabilizing actions in the South China Sea with his Philippine counterpart. He also underscored the ironclad US defense commitment to Manila in a conversation over a call with Foreign Minister Enrique Manalo. Manila and Beijing have had a series of escalating confrontations in disputed waters of the South China Sea. China claims almost all the strategic waterway. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Let's now take a look at the latest updates from across the continent of Europe. Archbishop Anastasios, the head of the Albanian Orthodox Church for 3 decades, has died at the age of 95 in an Athens hospital after being airlifted to the Greek capital following a virus infection. Anastasios is credited with having revived the Orthodox Church in Muslim-majority Albania after decades of so-called atheist rule and fostered peace between Christians and Muslims. A French millionaire who founded a cryptocurrency company was rescued with his wife after the 2 were abducted earlier this week. David Balland, the founder of Ledger, a company that sells devices to store crypto assets, was abducted alongside his wife, Amadine, earlier on Tuesday morning from their home in Vaison, France. 10 people have been arrested for their suspected role in the abductions. Spanish police have announced the arrest of a man wanted in Belgium over his suspected role in an October 2023 terrorist attack in Brussels, which claimed 2 lives. The man is suspected of having provided the attacker with the gun which he used to shoot at people in central Brussels before a football match between Belgium and Sweden was about to start. The gunman opened fire on Swedes, killing 2 of them and wounding a 3rd before leading police on an overnight manhunt. President Volodymyr Zelensky says that Ukraine is prepared to send coal to fuel a major power plant in the Moldovan breakaway region of Transnistria hit by an unprecedented energy crisis. We have coal that we can actually supply to Moldova, we can supply to Tiraspol if they really want people to have electricity, Zelensky said. He added, if we give them coal, we are ready to talk about a low price, even free of charge. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan said from Damascus that his country was engaged in an active dialogue with Europe and the US to help lift economic sanctions imposed on Syria. Saudi Arabia's top diplomat landed in Syria on his first visit to Damascus since the opposition ousted President Bashar al-Assad last month. Here's the full report.
Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan and Syrian leader Ahmed al-Sharaa held talks in Damascus, including on the kingdom's efforts to remove international sanctions from Syria. Prince Faisal travelled to Syria for his first official visit there since the downfall of Bashar Assad to meet top officials in the new Syrian administration. The talks with al-Sharaa are focused on supporting Syria's security, stability and unity.
في رفع وتعليق كافة العقوبات المفروضة على سوريا بأسرع وقت لإتاحة الفرصة لنهوض الاقتصاد السوري بالشكل الذي يدعم استقرار سوريا ويدعم العيش الكريم للشعب السوري.
Speaking at a press conference alongside the Syrian Foreign Minister Azad Hassan al-Shaibani, Prince Faisal said it was important to accelerate the lifting and freezing of all sanctions. He said Saudi Arabia was engaged in active dialogue with all relevant countries, whether the United States or the European Union, and we are hearing positive messages. The EU and the US placed an extensive sanctions regime on Syria during the rule of Assad, who was toppled from power by al-Sharaa's Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group and its allies in December. During his meeting with al-Sharaa, Prince Faisal passed on the greetings of King Salman and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The new Syrian administration chose Saudi Arabia for its first foreign visit when al-Shaibani led a delegation to Riyadh earlier this month. The kingdom has stepped up humanitarian aid supplies to Syria since the start of the year. Prince Faisal arrived in Syria after a visit to Lebanon, where he met the new President General Joseph Aoun. Bureau Report NewsX.
We'll now head to North America for more of the latest updates there. President Donald Trump travelled to California to survey the destruction from deadly wildfires. The visit took place as he continued to denounce the state emergency response being led by Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom. Trump then toured the ruins of Pacific Palisades with his wife Melania and then attended a roundtable discussion with local leaders. He vowed to sign an executive order that would pump water from northern parts of the state to the south. A$AP Rocky's assault trial began in Los Angeles, where the rapper is accused of firing a gun at a former friend. In opening statements, prosecutors described the rapper as the aggressor. They also claimed that he orchestrated a plan to shoot his childhood friend following a disagreement. The rapper faces up to 24 years in prison if convicted on 2 felony assault charges in the 2021 incident. President Trump fired 17 independent watchdogs at multiple government agencies, thereby clearing the way to replace them with loyalists. The inspectors general at agencies including the Department of State, Defense and Transportation were notified by emails from the White House. The dismissals appeared to violate federal law, which requires the president to give both houses of Congress the reason for the dismissals 30 days in advance. The US Supreme Court agreed to hear a bid led by 2 Catholic dioceses to establish the nation's first taxpayer-funded religious charter school. A lower court blocked the establishment of St. Isidore's School, ruled that its funding arrangement violated the limits on government endorsement of religion. The Supreme Court took up an appeal of that ruling by a state school board and the organisers of the proposed school. President Donald Trump has revoked security protection for former top US health official Anthony Fauci. He faced death threats since leading the country's COVID-19 response. Dr. Fauci was previously protected by federal marshals and then a private security company. One of Dr. Fauci's most vocal Republican critics, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, had called for his security to be revoked. Prosecutors said they will not file charges against Marilyn Manson after a years-long investigation of allegations of sexual assault and domestic violence. LA County District Attorney said the allegations are too old under the law and the evidence is not sufficient to press charges. His attorney said that they are pleased with the conclusion. That is all we have time for, but we'll be back shortly with more of your latest international news updates.